Well, I was wondering if some of you guys could comment what have been the challenges of being outside the recognition of the Lutheran Church in terms of what you can tell me a little bit in terms of rights or funding or whatnot.
For me, one of the most noticeable places where you realize that you're outside of the church, because we're received into a lot of the worship services and the functions that happen, but at Synod Assembly, which is the time when all of the churches in the region get together and they talk about issues that are important to them and they vote, as out gay pastors on the Extraordinary Lutheran Ministries roster, we have not had the right to vote at any of these events. And so this upcoming Synod Assembly, for the first time in 20 years, Jeff will get to vote. And at this last Synod Assembly, Jeff was able to be elected to the Synod Council, a body that we haven't ever been able to be elected to in the past. So there are doors that are opening professionally that were not open in the past.
And I think it's also the case that if you were to ask people with whom I work in my if you were to ask people with whom I work in my neighborhood, they would know that I'm a pastor who's very concerned about the migrant community and immigration rights, working with refugees and people who are seeking justice in our society, or working on issues in the East Bay of trying to get addiction centers opened and detox centers, which we don't have enough beds for, and a bunch of different issues that we're involved in. But they wouldn't necessarily think of me as the gay pastor. It's the pastor who's doing a bunch of these different things. In the Lutheran Church for 20 years, I've been known as the gay pastor, who is always causing a little bit of trouble. And hopefully that's going to change. Hopefully now that the church will kind of recognize us for the diversity of the gifts that we bring to the table, and is more open to a wider expression of the ways that we're making a difference, not just in the church, but in the world, where all of these pastors and so many others stand with so many communities at risk, and so many communities in great need, making a difference.
Today must feel, I think I read this, that Reverend DeLange had said this as well, but today must feel like a vindication in a lot of ways. Can I ask one of those of you who haven't spoken yet to perhaps comment?
I'm Ross Merkel. I'm the pastor of St. Paul Lutheran in Oakland. I think I only speak for myself, although we've had conversation among the seven of us, that there are mixed feelings about this for us. We're celebrating it. We're glad that this, certainly that the church has made this step. But we are all ordained. We were ordained, and we have done valid ministries ever since we were ordained. So this isn't somehow about being recognized as a valid pastor. Our congregations, the ministries that we serve, have always recognized us and honored us as called pastors. I think that what this day is for me, at least, is not so much about me. I think, in terms of my congregation and the other congregations that are represented here, the other ministries, is that this is about those people who shared a vision that they kept us when they could have said, "You're not welcome." And they kept us as their pastors. They worked with us, for us. They were our advocates. It's because of them that the church has changed. We could never have done it alone. So it's the courage of the congregations and the ministries that shared a vision of what the church could be and ought to be. So I think that, for me, that's what today really celebrates. Their vision, their faith, their courage, their determination, because many of those people didn't get to see this day. And so we will share it and enjoy it on their behalf. And you asked a question about the difficulties. Pastor Saltzman was whispering in my ear, and she's right, that the main difficulty, I think, is getting calls. There are only so many churches that are willing to risk discipline to call a pastor who's not on the ELCA roster. So there are many very gifted GLBT clergy who never had the opportunity to serve in a recognized ministry because churches were afraid to call them.
I'm very sorry, but because that phone was making those noises right there by the microphone, really appreciated what you had to say. If you wouldn't mind saying that last one again. Just about the call.
Now, this isn't a sermon where I've got a script.
No, but I think that was a valid point.
The
the chance to serve.
Yes, I mean, there are many gifted GLBT clergy, seminarians, people who want to be pastors who never had the opportunity because churches weren't willing to take the risk of going against the denomination. Our churches are the exceptions. They stood up and said, fine, we'll keep our pastors, we'll ordain them, you kick us out, but we're not going on our own. You'll have to make us leave. We're not leaving the church because we're committed to the church. And so what the change now, to a point, is that GLBT clergy will be more open. The avenues of having a call will be received. But, I mean, none of us are naive enough to think that every ELCA church is suddenly going to be wanting GLBT clergy. Yeah, collect all for it. But we're hoping.